Hey, shorty, what your name is? Do you have a man who you came with?
To the computer. Recording. Yep, so we good. What up, y'all? Welcome back. Street Academy Podcast, where we keep one foot in the academy and one foot in the streets. What's the deal? Man, super excited to be back with y'all. What's up, Dr. Hater?
Listen, I'm good. How are you?
Man, I can't call it. I'm beautiful, man. It's like the weather snuck up on me a little bit. So it kind of like switched. Y'all New York people, y'all keep
chilly. It's a little chilly, but it's good.
I don't know why y'all keep doing this. Like like we supposed to be keeping it warm until January, February, and y'all it's cold. Damn here, bro. But yeah, besides that though, it's cool, man. I mean, I actually like the fall. I like fall. That's like my favorite time of the year.
Me too. And I think, being in academia, it doesn't, like January is the new year, but really the fall feels like the new year.
Yeah.
Like for people in academia.
Yeah, it does. I don't know. In academia, I like starting the fall semester better than I like starting spring semester. Because you coming off a Christmas break, you know what I'm saying? You coming off the holiday break, you coming off of all of that. I don't like that. I don't like that. That's always like
spring feels super long to me.
Yeah, it's always depressing. So, but yeah, y'all, we back again. We were supposed, we were supposed to do, and I forgot. We were supposed to get those wrap snacks from the corner.
We were. I'm putting that in my calendar.
Yeah.
Wait. We were supposed to do it before this episode.
We're going to fill our special guests in.
No, we were supposed to do it before this episode because we're not going to want wrap snacks after this episode.
That's true. You know what? I feel bad saying we was going to do that because we got a whole plant-based food chef for here. And now I ain't going to be able to look her in the face.
You know what? Slutty Vegan does have a line of wrap snacks. So we might have to see if they fit with the new diet that we're gonna have after the conversation. So,
Okay. I ain't no Slutty Vegan had wrap snack. She got
I'm curious.
She got
mobile.
Yeah. I saw her on one of my favorite podcasts. Oh, well, I was gonna ask Shelley, do you watch this? But you said you don't watch podcasts. Do you watch the 85 South show though? You never heard of them? Man, why nobody never heard of them? They so funny. It's DC Young Fly, Carlos Miller, Chico Bean. You ever watch like Out and Out?
I know about the show, but I've never seen it.
Okay, well, with Nick Cannon.
Yeah, I know about it.
Okay, yeah. So they was on that, and they started their own their own podcast and like comedy thing they do. They've been doing it for like a couple years now, maybe a year and some change, 2 years. But they're like crazy funny. Like all three of them comedians, and they like stupid funny. And they had Slutty Vegan, the lady from Slutty Vegan, on their podcast like 2 weeks ago, and it was really good. Like she just broke down her whole life story and all of that. It was super dope. So we shout out to her, Pinky, and all that. Graduated CAU.
The building.
Graduated CAU. But we also have another graduate of the Atlanta University Center right here representing. For those who are on, let me pull up my Facebook Live too, y'all. We on Facebook Live. We've been doing this. We've been having fun with this Facebook Live thing. So we are live right now. And so for those of you who are on Facebook Live, so you having access to this firsthand before the public gets the edited version, you can see we have a special guest. So first of all, our other co-host, Amber K. Beasy, could not be here, but we sent her much love, and she's gonna be in the comments showing us love. But yeah, she couldn't make it this time. But we do have a special guest. I'm super excited about this person. Dr. Hader, you wanna go ahead and just
Yeah. this is a whole like little AUC circle right here. You know, we got Spelman, we got CAU. Shelley is my Spelman sister. My heart, I was saying earlier, of people that I know, there's like Jesus, then there's like Frantz Fanon, then there's like Tupac, then there's like Shelley.
Let's go, Shelley. So, she's not in the Trinity, but she in the quadruple.
The something.
The quad.
the parallelogram. So we here. Shelley is one of the smartest people I know, one of the dopest people I know, one of the most colorful people I know. Like literally, I just think of like colors when I see Shelley. Like look at her background. You know, she's just dope. She's excellent at everything, and she's about to like make some connections for us. We went to school together. We met in the financial aid office. So you know, HBCUs, you know what that is. And here we are, still rocking a zillion years later.
Thank you, my love. Thank you for having me.
Yes. So I guess let's just kick it off. Tell us who you are, where you are, like what you're about.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, hey everyone. So my name is Shelley, but I go by Shelley Wellness if you follow me on social media, on Instagram, on YouTube, and on Facebook. And I guess we'll get into how I got started a little later, but just a high level view. So I'm a food educator. I've been a foodie all my life, and through many different switches in like a nonlinear approach in my career, started off in psychology, ended up teaching Spanish for a little bit, became a caterer and a personal chef. And then through that catering and personal chefing, food blogging, presenting at food festival world, I decided to kind of lean in and hone in on education and teaching, because I saw that while we were enjoying a lot of different food and a lot of different bites, what was really missing was our understanding of what food is, what it's not, where it comes from, how it affects us, not just us also, but the impact that it has on the planet, the impact that it has on our mental health, not just our physical health. And so, yeah, that led me to what I do now, which I have an entire YouTube channel where I talk about food. It's called The Mindful Plate. So I teach you how to do different plant-based recipes. And occasionally I'll do some meat and some fish as well, because I recognize that we're a continuum. So it's not just vegan or not. Some people are in between. Some people are transitioning. So I definitely support people who are trying to make that transition as well. And I also teach workshops. I do a lot of corporate workshops because finally corporations are starting to realize that the health of their people matters. It increases productivity, but it also creates more DEI inclusivity for people feeling like they have a space to be well in their workplace, and that their workplace cares about them as employees. And so I'll go in and I'll do lunch and learns and workshops, helping them address employee workplace wellness, healthy snacks in the workplace, etc. So yeah, that's like high level view of some of the work I do now.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like the first thing that I think of when I think of healthy food, eating right, I think that automatically means food is nasty. It's not going to taste good. I'm not going to have a good experience with it. You know, just give me the stuff that tastes good, the deep fried, you know, give me that because that's delicious.
It up, and get that Lowry's on there.
Yes, extra salt, extra butter. Let's go. It's delicious. So what do you think are some of like the misconceptions? First, let me back it up. You're a mindful eater. What did you eat today and why?
Well, I started off with some greens because I went to a farm yesterday. So yesterday I went to a farm. I live in Brooklyn, so I left the city, went upstate New York, and went to a farm, and I got some fresh greens. I got some peppers. I got some apples and some pears because it is apple season, especially up here. And so I started off my day with those greens. One, I didn't want them to, like, for some people, they'll buy fresh produce. They stick it in the fridge. That, to me, is often the place where things go to die. So don't stick things in the fridge all the time.
Oh
yeah, a lot of things don't need to be in the fridge. They're okay. They can be out. And so I know that's our thought process. Like you buy food, you put in the fridge. But just think about
put batteries in the fridge. You know what I'm saying? When them joints go dead, we
survival.
Good over here. Wow, I didn't know that. Wow.
But if you think about it, when I picked the kale, there were some kale grains, curly kale. When I picked it, it was outside in the sun, chilling, doing its thing. It wasn't in the freezer. It wasn't in the refrigerator. It wasn't cold. It was like a nice sunny day around 70 degrees. So I just took it, stuck it in a jar of water, much like if you got fresh flowers, because now it's just the stalk and it's still living. It can still take up water. And I set that on the counter overnight. And then I had that this morning. So I started off my day with salad. Now, I know that's not a typical breakfast. Most people are starting off with say eggs or some egg replacement cereal, some type of sweet breads like pancakes or muffins or that sort of thing. And I used to start my day off with that. I love anything that went with butter and syrup. I'll have it. Jackie knows.
Wait, I gotta tell this story. We were in college. We used to go to breakfast on the weekend. Shelley used to come upstairs because we lived in the same dorm. I lived on the 3rd floor. She lived on the 1st floor. Shelley used to come and knock on my door so that we could go to the cafeteria so we could get biscuits, put the syrup on them, the butter on them.
Listen.
All of that.
Putting that in the refrigerator. She wasn't talking about those. No roots.
And you know what happened to me for eating all those biscuits every morning for months on end? I got a yeast infection. I became a biscuit. It was just you are what you eat. Hello? I became a biscuit, and I went to Student Health Services, and they let me know, oh, that's what happened. You're eating too much of the starch, too much yeast into your diet. Just back up off of it, and it'll clear out some of these. I had a yeast overgrowth, and it was at Spelman when I started to kind of get first ideas of how food affected the body. I wasn't necessarily trying to become a vegan and change my diet. Jackie was vegan at the time. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I'm still going to eat this chicken though. Fried chicken days, fried fish Fridays, but that's cool. But I did start incorporating more plants because I was realizing that my diet was so extreme. It was so extreme of all the heavy carbs, the fried foods, the meats, the cheeses, cheese on everything. And I was getting yeast infections. I was getting pimples all over my face. I was feeling tired and stressed, and a lot of it was just related to the food. So anyways, I started off my day with salad this morning because I find that whatever you eat, I think of it like a software. So if you think about your body as a computer, and the food you put in it as software, as a programming. So your body is constantly running on different instructions. And whether it's like the hormones that you already produce, the chemicals already flowing through your body, those are all instructions, but also what you feed it. And everything that you feed it has its own sort of natural design that's going to then instruct your body on what to do. As you grow, as you continue to be a human being, your body uses the material that you put into your body as food in order to rebuild itself, to restore itself, to redesign itself. So when I started making that connection, my desire to start off my day with pancakes, let's say banana chocolate chip pancakes with syrup and butter, which sounds delicious, even if it's vegan, but I recognize do I need to put more yeast and more flour in my body? Is that the instruction I want my body to run off for the next 3 hours? Or do I want to run off the instruction of this vitality, of this liveliness? Because when I picked those greens, they were beaming in the sun. So they were receiving information like solar information. They were receiving information from the soil. And so I'd rather start my day off with that type of information and that type of energy that's going to power me for the next 3 hours, rather than a dense sweet breakfast. And so that's generally how I think about how I choose my meals and what I'm going to eat for the day.
Wow, man, that's a lot. Just in knowing that, that, the fact that what it is that you putting in your body, I like that part where you talked about getting information from the sun, and then you want to put into your body the information that particular thing is getting, you know what I'm saying, that plant, preferably plants, you know what I'm saying, that's how you want to, and then using that, like you said, as a software to revitalize yourself all the time. That's incredible. I guess my question is, before we go even deeper into the questions around what foods to eat and how to prepare them and how it relates to, you know, these larger discussions around like race and inequality and all this other, and, you know, and depression and stuff like that. What was your, you kind of talked about your food journey. Have you always been doing what you're doing in terms of teaching people about food? Like, was that something you wanted to do since you was like a kid? You know, is that what you went to college for, to like learn food? Like, how did you start doing that? You know, was it something you always want to do, or was it, is the food thing something you like just fell into, or like a backup plan?
That's a great point, Jonathan. It was not linear. I'm gonna tell you that. When I got to Spelman, I was going to be a therapist. I was going to have my own private practice here in New York City, specifically working with Black and brown women, Black and Latino women, be more specific, around self-esteem and just mental health and wellness. And when I was at Spelman, I was a National Institute of Mental Health Fellow for 2 years. I worked at New York University, Emory University, doing research, presenting at conferences. I was on track. And after I graduated Spelman, I was accepted into Harvard University, and I got my master's in human development and psychology with a focus on risk and prevention. And it was when I got to Harvard that I realized, oh, wait, I'm not going to get a PhD in this. I'm going to go ahead and graduate and get my master's. Let's not play those games. I'm going to get my degree. I'm not going to get a PhD.
I'm about to get a master's, but I'm out there, baby.
I'm out. And for me, what happened was I was still in love with therapy. I was still in love with like mental health and like wanting to help women who look like me thrive in a society that was telling them that they shouldn't be thriving simply because of the color of their skin and because of what was between their legs and et cetera, right? However, the curriculum at the time was very much focused on research that we weren't the population that they were studying. Also, the people that were the leaders, the thought leaders of the research, the teachers of this research didn't look like us neither. And so I was unwilling to spend 7 years of my brain power of my life giving over to a belief system and a value system that was very much rooted in white supremacy and had nothing to do with healing us, but rather keeping status quo, while it might have been benevolent and like that sort of savior complex. I just wasn't interested in learning that. And so I was also devastated because I literally spent my academic career preparing to become this PhD. But I knew something inside me was like, nah, girl, get your degree and we'll figure it out. So after I graduated from Harvard, I was figuring it out. Jackie remembers up here because I was in New York for a little bit, figuring it out. And I spent a year like applying for stuff, doing all the things, and no job was coming through. And then I get this call. I did not apply for this position, but I get this call from Atlanta Public Schools, a principal, and she says, hey, I hear that you speak Spanish. We need a Spanish teacher. Will you come teach? Teach in 4th and 5th grade of Spanish. I learned Spanish because ideally I was going to use it in my private practice one day. And I just enjoyed like that. At the time, now we know a lot about the Black Latino culture, but back then we didn't know a lot about it, right? And I was just like, whoa, there's a whole bunch of Black people, they speak a different language, but if I can learn a language, I can connect to them. So I'm gonna go study abroad, I'm gonna spend time in Brazil and here, like, you know, just learn the culture. So I accepted this job teaching Spanish. And when I got into the job, I was like, ooh, this is our school system? I went to a completely different school system. So I was teaching downtown Atlanta in the West End, Atlanta Public Schools, and I was just heartbroken. This is the first time I'm starting to realize the school to prison pipeline, how it works, how it's engineered into the system. Like, this is by design. So it's almost like even if you try, you almost can't escape it because they just set you up in so many ways. And I'm a teacher in this type of school system. And so even though I taught Spanish and like my class didn't really count because they're not tested on that, I had a bit more leeway and creativity in how I taught. So while I should have been teaching Spanish language classes, I taught part Spanish language classes, and I focused a lot on Black history and like making connection between our children and then children within the Latin diaspora, Black children in the Latin diaspora as well. And while I was teaching that, I was like, this isn't I'm not going to do this. I know I'm not going to do this forever. And I just went back to what I love. And I've always loved food. I came out the womb of foodie. I used to read Bon Appetit magazine as a 10-year-old, like just reading it and just always being attracted. I was always wanting to like know what we're going to eat, helping menu plan, helping my mom grocery shop. So that curiosity was always in me. And at that time, I realized you're either going to follow what you want. You already got off the PhD path, right? So at this point, sis, pick something. Like, what are we going to do? So I decided to follow what felt real and true and happiness for me. And I decided to become a personal chef and a caterer. And those last 2 years of me teaching, I stopped telling everyone that I was a teacher, even though I was still working my job. So if I met you and you asked me what did I did, I'm a personal chef. I had cards, I created a website on social media. Anytime I cooked, I posted it. So by the time I left teaching, I had already built up a support group. And I built up a customer base. And so I just moved right in and I started catering corporate events and openings for like boutiques and different boutiques in Atlanta. If there were events, I would cater those as well. Catered for like the Harvard Club of Georgia. And then I'm also doing personal chefing. And through that process, I was loving it. I'm cooking, I'm enjoying it, but I'm realizing, man, people really have some jacked up relationships with food, myself included. And I was starting to see how much food was a coping mechanism. So this goes back to my therapy and psychology of like, wow, a lot of us are using food as an escape. We're not escaping with broccoli though, right? Like you have a bad day, you know, let me go get this piece of broccoli real quick and just, you know, cry out my pain. You go for the Popeye. You might go for the slutty vegan. You know, you're going for the thing that feels like a hug, feels like home, feels like a relief, a temporary escape. And when I got into this, and I was doing plant-based food, but I wasn't like talking about it in that sense. And when I started realizing that, I started designing workshops so that people could come and we could talk more about what food is and what it isn't. We could talk about emotional eating and ways to shift from emotional eating to mindful eating. And then ultimately, how do you take your favorite foods and remake them? Because I know you're still you're going to want ice cream. I can't tell you, I'm not going to tell you to stop eating what you love, but I am going to tell you what it does to you, the impact of it. And then I'm going to show you a way to make it so that you can still enjoy everything that you love about it. But as I like to say, the food has to love you back. And so that became the work. And that's how I ended up doing what I do now, where I teach people how to decolonize their diet, how to shift from emotional eating to mindful eating.
I have so many questions just like based on what you just said, but
for real.
I think you really hit on, you know, a question that I wanted to ask earlier when you started talking about going back to your therapy training and all of that, because when you first started talking about how initially you started out wanting to do therapy with women, talking about self-esteem and some of these like issues that are connected to different things, me knowing you, I'm like, oh, that's what you do now, just like in a really different way.
Yeah.
But how do you think food connects to self-esteem, to wellness, to depression? Like how is food like a player in that equation?
Absolutely. So one of the things I talk about in my workshop is mirror work. In my workshops with women. And mirror work is essentially when you stand in front of the mirror and you come to terms with yourself. But instead of the terms being what the outside has defined you to be, you define those terms for yourself. And for a lot of people who've never taken that time, the mirror generally is a place to maybe just check to make sure the outfit is coordinated. Make sure things are like, you know, nothing's looking too crazy, but to actually spend time in front of the mirror naked is it can be a confrontation for some folks, especially if you spend a lot of time uncomfortable in your body. So the discomfort with your body now plays into the self-esteem, right? Like how you feel about yourself. How you feel about yourself also plays into your degree of wellness and your mental health. So if you're walking around and the thoughts that you have are negative, if your self-talk is negative, it's putting you down. And again, your self-talk may not necessarily be your talk. It might be what you heard your mama say about herself, or your daddy say about himself, or whatever adult was in your life that had influence over you, whatever TV shows you watched growing up, music videos, etc. So we all have like a lot of external ideas that we then place into our body, and that becomes our self, our image, our being. So in this mirror work, I help people make the connection to see that what's in front of you is who you were. Like where you are now is everything you were, and also everything you ate. So what you eat becomes who you are. And so that meal that you had last week is there, is present. And so we begin to like start making those connections. And then that also then informs what we decide to eat in the future. Because with every single meal that you have, it's a vote for what you want to feel, not just in the next 3 hours, but also in the next 3 years. The beautiful thing about our human body is that we are regenerative beings. When we were growing up, we were taught that like the things that could regenerate were what? Like lizards, they could regenerate their tail.
Like their tails and stuff?
But were you ever taught that you could regenerate yourself?
No.
What about you, John?
Know that.
Yeah, me neither. But the truth is, our bodies are constantly regenerating themselves time and time again. When we're born, we're given like a starter pack from our mom and our dad. But the rest of what sustains us is what we put into our mouth, what goes into our body. And so that's what our body is constantly building itself off of. And so if you begin to now look at your food as your future self versus like, I'm about to just get into this plate and like get the itis passed out, or I'm just about to have a good time and eat this plate of wings. And, you know, it's just part of the socialization of things. But instead you begin to actually look at what's in your plate as you, it's your future. And so your body, your skin repairs itself, replaces itself, changes itself every 30 days. Your heart can replace itself every 7 years, which is crazy. Like you get an entirely new body. Your organs are constantly regenerating. So how you feel, how you age, it depends on what is on your plate. You can decide how quickly that process goes in terms of like degrading, or how slow that goes in terms of aging backwards. And I'm gonna big myself up here. I'll be 40 in a month, and no one.
Listen, we gotta stop. What she said? What did she say, Dr. Hater? She's gonna be 40 in a month. I told her, I said, I thought you was one of her. I thought she was one of your mentees. I thought she was like one of your students that you was like, oh, you know, my friend.
Yes.
That is great. Y'all see this? This is living proof.
Mm-hmm.
Living proof. Living proof.
That's
And it starts with every moment it is a decision of that. And so going back to the original question about self-esteem and wellness is that you can really create your wellness on your plate. And so one of the things I always say is like, if you begin to focus on liberating your plate, liberate your plate from the toxins, liberate your plate from the death and dis-ease, liberate your plate from the things that take away energy, and then start to replace that with things that give you more vitality. And it doesn't have to be boring. If you follow my YouTube channel or my blog, you know food is not boring at all. If you eat Slutty Vegan, you know food is not boring, right? Like the vegan food has come such a long way. But this is beyond vegan. This is moving towards being mindful. And so doing that type of work where you're showing up with yourself every day, doing mirror work where you are with yourself and you are defining for yourself who you are and who you're going to be, and then taking that definition into the kitchen and creating a meal that reflects the future that you want. That does a lot to boost your wellness. Obviously, like you start to feel better by eating healthier foods, and then that gives you an increase in self-esteem. And I want to touch also on the mental health piece of one of the very interesting things about our body, like I said, we're regenerative beings, we're so dope, is that we tend to think about ourselves as an individual. Like I am one person. When in fact, we are like 300 trillion cells. And each cell is its own living thing. where different organisms, and some of the organisms aren't even us. A lot of the organisms were also hosts to other organisms. We host bacteria in our bodies. So you've heard of gut bacteria, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So the gut bacteria is an independent organism. How we get our gut bacteria is when we're born, we get a starter pack from our mom. So that's become, if you are born through a vaginal birth, there is a transferring. So you pick up this sort of transferring of immunity from your mom during that birth process. And that's where you start your original gut bacteria. And then as you eat, you take in other bacteria. This is why it's important where we're like, don't put that in your mouth, letting children explore, because it builds up a biodiversity. So they're putting stuff in their mouth and they're taking in gut bacteria. Now, what we want in our body is a balance. We don't want too much bad and we don't want too much good. Either way, we just want a balance. So you're going to have some of both. But what happens is when there is an imbalance, especially if there's too much of the bad bacteria is so intelligent. It has to survive. And the only way it's going to survive is through us. So what it does is there's a brain, a second brain inside of your stomach, inside of your gut. And so what it does is it attaches itself and it says, hey, I'm going to send a signal through your system, like your neural system, and I'm going to send a signal to you, let you know I'm hungry. So oftentimes when we're experiencing cravings, we're thinking it's us, like, oh, I'm craving cake, I'm craving this, whatever. But it's the gut bacteria inside of you that's like, sis, you haven't fed me in a minute and I need some food and this is what I want. And so it sends cravings using our own neural pathway, right? To tell us this is what it wants. And then we begin to feed it. And as we're feeding it, that creates either, depending on what you're feeding it, can create an imbalance in your gut. So if you're feeding bad bacteria all the time with a lot of starch, a lot of dairy, a lot of sugar, a lot of dead flesh, a lot of meat, etc., right? Then what happens is that particular bacteria creates that state of imbalance, which then you feel mentally. And so it's attaching itself to your system. So it's not necessarily always you feeling it. It could be this bacteria that's also creating those feelings for you.
That's right.
It really, and talking about that relationship with food and making it so like you almost humanize the diet and humanize our understanding of food, our relationship with food, especially when you talked about what you eat is what you're going to be. It's crazy. Like this just happened last week. It wasn't funny at the time, but I was leaving work. I'm driving home and I had a long drive and I was hungry. And I had just made some spaghetti with some ground beef or ground turkey or something like that. Like, it was cool, you know what I'm saying? Somewhat healthy, corn and all of that good stuff, like a nice little Italian situation at the crib. But I was like, man, I ain't gonna make it to the crib. I'm hungry now. So I stopped by Burger King, you know what I'm saying? Got a little Whopper Junior. Like, I ain't even getting nothing big. I just got a Whopper Junior. And I felt better because I was like, I'm about to get this orange juice instead of so I'm like, see, a nigga eat healthy, you feel me? So I got the Whopper Junior, killed that on the way, got home, ate my spaghetti, ate my corn, my garlic bread, cool. Little salad. And then around 2 or 3 o'clock, this was a Wednesday, 2 or 3 o'clock the next day, or no, I'm talking about in the morning, I started feeling real bad, like horrible, right? So I'm just like, oh man, my stomach killing me. I'm running to the bathroom like all the time. Like, it's horrible, it's bad. So I couldn't even eat. I couldn't move the next day. I was literally just on the floor like the entire day. I had to be on a panel. I don't even know how I did it. I don't know what I said. I don't even know if it made sense. It was about voting or something. I don't know. The only thing I know, I didn't tell people to vote for Trump. I wasn't that sick. But I don't know who I told people to vote for, where to go. I was not in a good place. So I was jacked up, and so I imagine it was some kind of a food poisoning or something that I ate. But the thing was, it wasn't even the fact, because I knew eventually it'll pass. I did feel like I was going to die, but I was like, if I don't die, it'll pass, right? It's probably a 24-hour thing. So I'm sitting here like, so that was the worst part. Well, that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was, where did it come from? I didn't know if it was something I had yesterday morning. I didn't know if it was the Burger King. I didn't know if it was the spaghetti. And I just made that spaghetti. I was going to eat on that for the rest of the, you know what I'm saying, for the rest of the week. So I was like, man, and that was the part that was kind of bugging me. Like, do I throw this out? Like, not knowing the source, because things happen in your life. You know what I'm saying? You get sick or whatever. But the worst thing is not knowing the source. It's like when you go to the doctor and you're sick, you got this problem. And so you go to the doctor, and what do you want them to do? You want them to find the source. And when they can't, you're like, why did you go to school for all these years? Why are you getting paid all this money? Why am I getting charged all this money? And you can't find the source of the problem. So that was the worst part for me. So when you just said what you said, that's what I took from it. Like, what I ate told me that what I was going to be in that next, 12 hours or so, like that. And so now I need to be more careful and think strategic and be more mindful eating. Y'all holla at mindful eating. Like, mindful eating, to say what I put in my mouth at 4 o'clock in the afternoon is going to determine how I feel at 2 in the morning. You know what I'm saying? And so that's how I put that together. So, man, listen, you over here changing lives. Yeah.
Listen, that's it, Jonathan. That's it. Because interesting enough, our meals tend to last us anywhere from 3 to 6 hours, depending on the density of them, the nutritional value, the scent, et cetera. So every 3 to 6 hours, you might get hungry. So every time you're eating, it's like, what do I have to do? So for example, I started off with greens today, right? Because I knew I had meetings going on. I needed to be attentive, focused. If I would have had the banana chocolate pancakes, even though vegan, that's something I can do when I'm about to climb a mountain, right? Because I can burn that off. I'm not climbing any mountain today. I'm sitting at my desk. I don't need to be feeling like, oh man, I feel overwhelmed, I feel dozy. So it's really true. And something else to think about, to take that a step further, is meat. So I am not against meat eating, right? So I want to talk about this, because you had a burger, you had beef spaghetti, let's dive into this. I'm not against eating meat. I am not here to preach veganism. I think that plant-based eating has tremendous value, more so because our diet has been so far, the standard American diet has been so far filled with so much toxins that the plant-based just feels like a godsend, right? After you've been eating that way for so long. However, my family is from Jamaica. Jackie's family is also from the Caribbean. Back home, our families eat different, and they eat more from the land. They also eat meat. Meat is a thing, but that meat generally, for my mom growing up, for example, was not coming from a factory farm where it spent its entire life from infancy until it was mature enough for slaughter in a crowded place where there was a lot of stress, where there was a lot of violence. Just so we're clear, animals see the violence, they feel the things, they get all that. And so there's raping that's happening, where they are forcing animals to be pregnant. We don't think about it that way, because they're animals, but that is what's happening, right? They're slaughtering animals in front of other animals. And so the animal sees oh shoot, that's what's gonna happen, creates all the stress. So as the scientific principle says, that energy is neither destroyed nor created. It's simply transferred. So if that cow or that chicken or that pig has spent or that lamb or that sheep or that goat has spent most of its life in that type of environment, imagine when we think about humans who spend their life in that environment, right? How they end up growing up as adults, how they can or cannot cope within society. So if that animal has experienced that, they have the same issues. They have the same elevated levels of cortisol, stress hormones. So now you kill the meat. So you've taken the life out the animal, but all of that stress that was there is still in there. So now you chop it up, put it in patties, ship it across the country to different restaurants, and then they serve it in front of you. It look good, right? Juicy burgers, some bacon, some cheese, a little bit of caramelized onions, right? Some garlic aioli, some toasted brioche, some lettuce and tomatoes. It looks good, right? Right?
That sounds delicious.
It did before, till you told me about the raping and going on. I ain't even
exactly
about it.
Exactly. But instead, what you also end up eating is you end up eating rape and violence and pain and suffering and a lifetime of that. So now that goes into you. Something very interesting that I've noticed, I've been doing this for 10 years. And so like I said, even now I am primarily plant-based, 90%. That 10% that I leave is for generally when I travel, because I am a foodie. So I find that other countries tend to have higher standards of processing meat, of allowing the animals to actually live humanely before they die versus here in the United States. Right. So I will eat meat or fish, like if I'm traveling, but here I'm like, nah, forget it. However, what I've noticed is that the reason why I got to the point to say, forget it, I can't do it anymore, is because every time I would eat meat, I would have nightmares. And the nightmares would always be about someone trying to kill me. I never have dreams about people trying to kill me. But anytime I would eat meat, and I recognized like that's what's processing. I ate that meal at 6 p.m. So at 2 a.m. when I'm sleeping, what's processing in my gut? And remember, there's a brain in the gut. So I'm experiencing, as I'm processing, I'm not just processing this dead meat out of my system, I'm also processing the emotions that cow felt. And so that's manifesting itself in my own body and through the form of hormones, through the form of chemicals, and it's showing up in my dreams as well and affecting me. So there are so many connections that I just started making from that experience. I was like, oh, this is wild. And then anecdotally, from working with different women in my workshops, I'm realizing like, okay, this isn't just me. Other people are experiencing other side effects as well. Everyone experiences it differently, but essentially, it's not just a cheeseburger. There's so much more that's behind it. There's a real cost to pay to eating meat.
Man.
You're speechless?
Yeah, because I'm like, why? I've always understood that, vegan and plant-based is definitely the better way. But I'm like, Jesus ate, fish and, you know what I'm saying, all of that. But then it's like, you're absolutely right when you put it within that context. Everything that animal goes through, and we believe in energy and we believe in spirits and we believe in all of those things. And so just thinking about what's going on those farms and the trauma, you know what I'm saying, that these animals are going through, it still lives in that blood. You know what I'm saying? Essentially. And that blood gets packaged, frozen. And then when you take it out, you know what I'm saying? And you supposed to be getting all the blood out when you frying it or whatever it is you're doing. But some of that is still in there. And that's real. That's real.
And it doesn't go out. It just changes form. So instead of it being like red blood, it's now just cooked. It's become brownish. It's changed the meat color. Like when you cook blood, have you ever had blood sausage? It just, as it gets older, it just becomes kind of black. I know I don't eat it neither, but I've seen the process of it being made. But even if it's ground beef, when you first get it, it's kind of reddish, but by the time you cook it, it's brown. All that changed that you added some heat to that blood and then it changed the color. Still there. Then you added some seasoning so you don't taste it, right?
So I'm curious how all of this connects to race, because I'm already thinking, earlier, you said you're about to be 40 in a month, and I immediately thought, well, Black don't crack, but we out here eating burgers and all this kind of stuff and what have you. So I'm just curious how all of this connects to race, and even the language of a colonized diet, or a decolonized diet. How is all of this connected to race for you?
Let's get into it. Hey, so colonized diet and decolonizing our diet. So I
love that term. Yeah, please. Yeah, I love that.
Yes, I teach people how to decolonize their diets. And I want to be clear that decolonizing a diet is not just for Black and brown people or colonized peoples. It's also for Europeans, because Europeans have been colonizing themselves as well. However, I focus on Black and brown folks. So this came about for me. The first time I became aware of the term as well was through these two authors who wrote the original book, Decolonize Your Diet. It's these two women out of California. They're both Mexican indigenous, and they teach at, I want to say Cal State, but don't quote me. Anyways, they wrote this book called Decolonize Your Diet, and it was for Mexican folks to say, listen, we have an entire rich heritage of food that our grandmothers and our grandfathers were eating, and it kept them strong and healthy for generations. And we've been now experiencing all these health implications, all these health challenges because of what we've been eating. So I'm calling on us to go back to our original traditions. And they wrote a whole cookbook with like these sort of like, you know, Mexico is a huge country. We tend to think about tacos and burritos, whatever, but they have so many different regions and different culinary practices that come from those different regions. And just to big up Mexico really quickly, recently, as in like the past month, Mexico, the government put a ban on importing American processed food. And so they're no longer going to be importing that. And that's been a huge thing. But they realized, listen, we have too many people having diabetes, hypertension. We didn't have these issues before this. But with the whole trade agreement that was like back in the 90s and having all this food come in, they started to see a decline in their population's health. So they said, nah, we're kicking y'all out. We're not going to have this anymore. So that's been a whole thing, like food policy news. But anyways, so with that, when I started teaching the workshops, I wanted to make it clear, because I was realizing that for Black people especially, the whole health food world is still extremely white. We are just now starting to put a dent in it, but it's been white for a minute. And so our indoctrination to healthy eating has been a bowl of salad with like lots of water and a very skinny white woman like enjoying that salad. Is that appealing to you?
No.
No, not really. Right? Not interested.
None of those.
Right. So if you tell me, like, this is how I gotta be healthy. Oh, and add some quinoa and like have an apple. That's not even food. Like, that's not even how I grew up. So I was realizing that what's been missing from the conversation is culturally relevant recipes. So I grew up with a Black American father and a Jamaican mother. Soul food and West Indian food were like, that's what I grew up on. That's what fed me. That's what nurtured me. And then I also spent part of my childhood in Europe. So my taste buds are all over the place. And I'm not interested in just having salad to be healthy. So what I started to think about was on both sides of my family, my Black American family and my Jamaican family, the grandparents that are alive, that are still not only alive, but like have full sound functioning of their mind, live in their homes by themselves. Like they have like, you know, some of my aunties and uncles who will help them, whatever, but they pretty much can care for themselves, are my Jamaican grandparents. My Black American, my father, who's also Black American, he's no longer with me. He passed away in 2012. All of his siblings passed away before him. His mother passed away shortly after him. His father passed away before him. So Black American side dying off. And recognizing that, and in addition to all the stresses that come with being Black, let's just focus on the food, is that the connection. So Black people, our connection to the land, Black Americans, is traumatic. There was a time where we were forced to work a land that we didn't get any profit from. So the idea of farming or eating from the land is like, forget that. And then once we did have liberation and we were able to have land and farm it, we were terrorized for decades from the KKK, now that you police, whatever, who are now like, you know, taking your land, stealing your land, killing you because you're on the land. So you're like, forget this, I'm gonna leave. So the Black American connection to land is heavily traumatized, but the land is where we get our food. The land is what feeds us. So if we are no longer wanting to connect to the land, which is the thing that feeds us and sustains us, we're having a huge issue. So decolonizing our food is also coming with that, where it's like restoring and rehealing our connection to the land, which is part of the reason why I spent some time in a farm yesterday. Just going to go see, like I'm used to going to the grocery store or the farmer's market to get my stuff, but just to see it growing right there, I'm like, wow, I still don't want to be a farmer, but I appreciate it, right? Mm-hmm. I appreciate it. So the next thing now, when I look at my Jamaican side of the family, it is just standard. Whether you have a lot of money or a little bit of money, you will always have a fruit tree. So no matter your economic status, your land is fruitful. There are breadfruit trees, mango trees, and if you don't have, the neighbor has. And so there's an exchange. It's just part of the island way. And right. So when they come here, when they migrate, my grandparents live in London, and then also like we live here in the US. When they come here, they always plant a garden. So there's always this connection that the food is there. So that's like part one of decolonizing your diet, is restoring and healing your connection to the land. The second part is then starting to recognize that that salad is not going to get it. That quinoa is not going to get it unless that quinoa has some good seasoning in it, and you mix it like, let's say if you're coming from Puerto Rico, instead of arroz con pollo, you're doing quinoa con pollo, right? And instead of pollo, you might do mushrooms or whatever. So you're still making the foods that culturally you grew up on that make sense, but instead you're going to like use these other ingredients. And so instead of white rice, which is known to like, it can break down, it's a heavy starch, can break down in the sugar, you might use a grain like quinoa. So instead of rice and peas, it's quinoa and peas, right? Put your coconut milk in there, put your thyme in there, you know, add some of your seasoning and cook it up. And then you have a pot that's very familiar, but the ingredients, you're just starting to switch them around. And so a lot of it is just beginning to look at what is it that you love to eat, your macaroni and cheese, your collard greens that you might make with smoked neck bone. But instead of using smoked neck bone, you're going to use liquid smoke, which gives it that smoky flavor, a little bit of smoke.
Really?
Yeah. So it gives it that flavor.
I was wondering how you was going to take my neck bones out and what you was going to do. I'm like, listen, you able to do this?
A little bit of liquid smoke, some apple cider vinegar, a little bit of smoked paprika, some garlic, or even how the Ethiopians do it. They have collard greens. They call it gomen. It's so good, right?
Yeah.
It's just
oh my
garlic,
God. Yeah.
it's ginger. It's a little bit of jalapeno and some oil and some water, and you got collard greens, and it's the best thing you ever tasted. You don't even miss it.
Right now, all right.
Listen, I'm gonna say this. I like lived on American style greens, you know, up until, I don't know, like maybe 10 years ago or so, when I got introduced to the fact that not like collard greens are not just a thing that happens here in the US. Like greens happen like in other places, and they are bomb. So even when I make green, I have some greens in the fridge, but I have some I have some greens right now that I need to cook, and I do not have any intention of making them like American style. I'm like Ethiopian style, West African style. Like I'm about to cook these things up, and I always get a lot of compliments on them. You had the greens before? You came to my house for brunch. I made the grits and the greens.
I remember that. Those were really good. You didn't make those the same? You didn't make them?
No. Those really had 11 herbs and spices in it.
Wow. I remember that.
Jack, you made a great point about looking to other parts of the diaspora for the same thing. So one of the things about decolonizing our diet as Black people is recognizing that, first of all, and I don't mean this in a Brother Black type of way. Anybody who went to Morehouse College and took Brother Black, shout out to you. You already know what I'm about to say. But if it's white flour, if it's white sugar, if it's white butter, if it's white milk, like we got to decolonize that, because that is stuff that will clog you up. It'll clog up your arteries. It'll clog up your heart. It'll clog up your gut. Like it'll clog up your brain with the sugar. That diabetes can lead to dementia. I mean, these are all things that. It's crazy. Yes, diabetes can lead to dementia for sure. There's studies that are starting to come out now. This is new research that what didn't exist back when we were coming up, but now it's coming out that, oh, that's what's been linked into that. The overemphasis of sugar in our diet. And so with that being said, is that we as Black people through the diaspora have such an incredible culinary heritage. And just so I'm also clear, American food is Black food, because we were the ones who were cooking. Our ancestors were the ones who were cooking. And so like that Southern food, that's coming from us. That's our genius in the kitchen. Exactly. That's our genius in the kitchen. And the food world is starting to give us our credit, because we're not sitting down quietly about this. Like, you know, we're in here talking and chomping as well. But all that being said is that our food traditions are black-eyed peas, sweet potatoes, collard greens. These are all coming from the motherland as well. And so I saw this one video of this woman. She was getting her hair braided, and they're putting rice grains into the braid. And they were saying that back during the transatlantic slave trade, one of the ways of like sustaining and making sure that folks would be okay is like putting rice or seeds into their hair and then shipping that like across the Atlantic, so that whenever they got to wherever they were getting to, they'd have food to sustain them and be able to plant that food. So these should
it's crazy.
Right?
I've never known that.
Yeah,
I'm a big like history. Like I love history stuff. So that's insane. That just blew my mind. I'm sorry. Please continue.
No, you're fine. I have the same reaction, but these traditions are rooted in us. And so I want us to not get stuck in thinking that our soul food is a destruction of us. The only reason that it's become that way is because we've gotten away from the land. So we're using a lot more oil and like fry and all the things, whatever. And also, to be clear, Jackie asked about like how is this applying to race? Let's talk about food access. Everybody don't live near Whole Foods. Everybody doesn't have a Trader Joe's or farmers market. There are a lot of folks, and this is race, but more so class. Race happens to fall along class a lot in this country, but it's more so class. If you live in a neighborhood that economically is not one that, let's say, developers prefer to develop, i.e., right? Then you're going to not have supermarkets, or you're going to have things like maybe like the Piggly Wiggly or the bodega. If bodegas are a thing up north, I don't know what you would call that down, but like the local corner store, where you're going to get a lot of ready. You're going to get a lot of ready-made snacks and foods, and like, you know, or you just get
snacks, Jackie.
The assortment, the
Migos rap snacks.
array at the corner store.
So your access to fresh produce is limited. And so then if you're not growing up with that taste, I'm going to be honest, an orange is not going to compare to a wrap snack, because the wrap snack has the added benefit of the salt and the sugar and like the oil to create that, and whatever flavorings they add in, so that now your taste buds are hooked. So if you taste the orange compared to that, it's like, this is whack. So there's also like there has to be an appreciation built in over time in your diet for the natural taste food. And when you do start to decolonize your diet, you start to detox, you start to take out those foods that we've been like taught to eat, essentially marketed to since we were little. It does take some time, but also you'll find that your taste buds will reset, and all of a sudden you can taste the divinity and the gloriousness in natural foods that come from the earth.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I was thinking about, since you brought up like race and class, and I'm glad you brought up like the food deserts, because one of the many parts of conversations like these that people don't really discuss when they're talking about, well, just eat right and just do all these things. You know, I believe Black people, I believe poor and working class people, they want to eat right. They want to eat healthy. I don't want to go too deep into this, but I had a community organization that myself and my sister had, we was doing down in Atlanta for a number of years. And one of the things people used to love to tell us back, this was like 2000, like 10, 11, 12. People used to love to tell us, Black people don't like to eat healthy. All they want to eat is chicken. All they want to eat is fried foods. And so what we did was we challenged all of those stereotypes that we would hear. And we would say, you know what, we believe in our people. We know that if we provided the healthy food options, they would eat it. And so anytime we would put on our community empowerment sessions, and we would set up in all of the, poor and working class areas of Atlanta, West End, Decatur, Bankhead, all these different places, we would always have healthy food options. And when I tell you these kids is coming out of the projects, and they're coming to our empowerment sessions, and they're taking the literature and they're listening to what we're saying, and they're getting the food, the fruit was always gone. The healthy food options were always, they would take it and run back upstairs and then come back and ask for more. My mama said, can I get some more? You can have as much as you want. All this is for you. And so it's like our people want to eat healthy. We understand the value of putting good nutrients into our bodies. That's not like I think the literature make it seem like people make it seem that's a middle class thing and that's a white thing. Like Black people don't want to eat healthy. So I'm so glad you mentioned that, like that food access because a lot of it is structural and a lot of it is systemic. So I guess my question to you then, and I don't know if this is like, you know, I don't know if this is too big of a question, or maybe if you could even point us in the right direction, but how do we, you know, how do poor, working class, African-American minorities who don't have as much access to those food options, you know, how do we still move towards that mindful diet or a plant-based diet or a better diet? You know what I'm saying? And then alongside that, if you could even address, you know, I know a lot of people say, well, I don't really be having time to like put together super healthy foods and stuff. You know, I be busy. It's just so much easier. Like how do we address that? Like think about like a single mother with, you know, with 3 kids, you know what I'm saying? And she trying to be plant-based, you know, it could be difficult, you know what I'm saying? Especially if the kids gotta eat, they hungry, they gotta do their homework. It's like, you know what? I gotta hurry and put something in your belly so you can go get that homework done so you can go to bed, because you gotta get up at 6 a.m. and go to school. And so it's like talk to, you know, to them, like you said, like the sisters or the brothers in the bodegas, or if you live in like rural Georgia, or if you live in metro Atlanta and you can't, or you don't live in Buckhead, so you can't go to the Whole Foods like that. Like how do we address those people? I know that might have been a lie. You just go wherever you go with it.
Oh, that's such a good question.
That's a really good question. And I want to add on before I dive into that question is that the main issue here is policies, not people. And so, that's often what's hidden. And so like we see the people, so people just make the judgment on oh, it's you, Black people don't like this or whatever. But it is the policies about where things are placed, where you know, who gets access to what, et cetera. So because of these policies, then we're gonna have a lack of access in the grocery stores. But no matter what grocery store you shop at, I will say that if there's let's say you live in a place where there's like a lack of fresh options, the next best thing is to go to frozen. Stay away from canned by all costs, but I do recognize that for some folks, that's the only option is the can. But the canned is where you have all of those issues with like the like copious amounts of sodium that are contributing to hypertension, et cetera. And by that point, the vegetable is just dead. It's just fiber. There's nothing. It's not really what the vegetable is meant to be. All the nutrients and the enzymes that make it work are no longer there. So frozen is the next best option. The other thing I would say is that I get this question a lot about like, well, I'm busy. I don't have a lot of time. I don't think that we should be trying to find quick fixes. I don't think that we should be trying to find like the 5-minute meal to feed all the people. I think we should be looking at our policies, and that's part of what I work on. And so much of the United States, especially, the way it's designed is work, produce. So because of our relationship with work and the nature of production, which feeds into capitalism and keeping this economy thriving and making sure that everyone is getting the money and getting the dollar. And so what happens is we end up chasing all of that and putting so much energy into that, or just trying to get the bills paid. So you end up, you like do all this, you become an adult, and it's just all about paying bills, paying more bills, getting some money, etc. So your attention and your focus is to like grinding. And instead of your attention, your focus is to thriving. And part of thriving is to really like take inventory or audit your own life systems. And in your life systems, there should be a system in there where you're well fed, well, you're nourished, you and your family. So if that means that you meal prep, if that means that you have like mandatory non-negotiable on Sundays, we're going to go to the market and get your children involved in the process, because they're also learning from you. So it's not enough to just feed them and then like they have no idea what to do for themselves when they get older, and they just revert back to the McDonald's and to the drive-thrus or whatever, because that's what's easy. And so I know that McDonald's and Popeyes and all of them have made it very easy to feed you. Like you made that choice. You knew you had spaghetti at home. You meal prep, right? You took care of yourself.
Yeah,
like,
you're right. I'm
hungry now.
Yeah.
And so, you know, part of the way to alleviate that is like, what if you have packed yourself a snack and you had that so you could be eating that on your way home to hold you over until, but I my whole entire workshops are about mindful eating. So I am not the person who to say like, oh yeah, you can do a quick fix and like make this in a hurry, because I do believe that feeding yourself and nurturing yourself this way, it does take some time. You are going to have to carve out time. The same way you carve out time to go hang out with friends, or carve out time to go to work, or, I mean, work is kind of mandatory, but carve out time. But feeding yourself is mandatory too. Right. You know, like you have to eat healthy. And so I think the other part of it is that in different communities, there are CSAs, there are food banks. Food banks I kind of have challenges with, because food banks often are passing on more packaged foods and more cans. I get that it helps alleviate hunger, but it doesn't do a lot for nutrition. And that's what we're missing. You can be full and still not be nourished. And so the CSAs, which are community supported agriculture, was created to address the very problem of there's no access in your community to fresh farm food. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to find all the local farms in your city, in your state. We're going to go to them and we're going to say, give us your produce. And then we're going to put them in individual boxes. And if you subscribe to it, and there are CSAs that also take EBT, so it doesn't have to be coming out your money. And if you subscribe to it, then you get a box of fresh produce delivered to your house every week or every 2 weeks. You can decide the frequency. And that's a way to get that into your life if you can't get it in your local grocery store.
Yo, I did not know that. Jackie, did you know that?
I did. Yes, but the only issue that I've had, and maybe you could tell us like what the options are, Shelley, because when I looked at the CSA boxes, they were too much for one person. And like, now I'm not just one person, but I would look at it and be like, what am I going to do with 10 pounds of apples? Like,
sometimes if you're not coming from like a chef mindset, a foodie mindset, right, then it can be overwhelming because you're getting the produce in its raw form. Whereas when we go to the grocery store, it's been processed to some degree, whether that means it's just been chopped and put in a bag or fully made into like veggie lasagna, right? Like whatever. It's been processed to some degree. But when you get it, sometimes it's still got the dirt on it, the roots attached. I mean, you seeing it. It just came up from the ground. So if I got a 10-pound bag of apples, I would eat what I could and make applesauce with the rest, and I'd stick that in the freezer. If I got a whole bunch of parsley, I would make pesto. I would make, even though like you use basil for pesto, I just use parsley instead. But I make some type of sauce. I would try to find ways to make it into a thing that I could put into a freezer and then finish off later. So that way I'm not wasting any of it. Or make a big batch of soup, put that in the freezer, because you can always take that and finish off a meal. And your freezer is your best friend. Going back to your earlier question, Jonathan, about the mom who has the children, she's just trying to feed them. If you are making things, like when you make food, always make a second batch for later that you can stick in the freezer. So on that night, when you don't have the time, that's the original TV dinner. Forget Marie Callender. You already have something you set up from a month ago, and it's still good. So you can take that out. Like, I don't have time to cook this week. Okay, I'm gonna use this stuff from the freezer. But the CSA, it does work really, really well for families, for sure, because you do get quite a bit of produce.
I was gonna say, to your earlier point, well, two things really, about the kids. One thing that I realized when I go home and all the kids are there, so instead of making a meal just for me, I'm making a meal for 8 people. Like that's a heavy lift. So I get all those kids in the kitchen. I'm like, you on chopping onions, you on stirring the pot, you on whatever else. So we're all like making it together. I realize that as the kids are in the kitchen cooking it up with me, they are invested in the food. When I go home now, they're not like, let's go out and get pizza. They're like, can you make the Brussels sprouts? The other thing that they're always out there, like, can you make the couscous? I think they just like the way it sounds, but So, but they're into the food. You know, my baby cousin is here. She's staying with me for a little bit. And a couple nights ago, she was like, oh, can I roast some carrots? Because the first day that she got here, we were roasting vegetables, and now she, you know, really enjoyed the carrots. So now, you know, that's her thing. She likes to roast carrots, you know. So kids, I think, get invested in, you know, what they learn and what they participate in. And the other thing, you know, I love a good snack. When I first became vegan, snacks were my best friend, because at the time, finding quick, easy, accessible, healthy vegan food was not super easy. And so I didn't want to just like be caught out there, because I knew that if I did have something that wasn't vegan at the time, I had trained out of it. So I knew I was going to get sick. So I would keep a good snack in my satchel, you know, whatever that snack would be. Maybe I would keep several snacks, but you know, I became the snack lady because I just had the snacks. But that's the major key right there.
And to your point about the snacks, Jackie, I'm thinking about Jonathan and his, you know, what led him to Burger King. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm gonna jump on a limb and say that part of what led you to Burger King is because you'd been there before, and you knew that that was a place where you could go and get that little thing that'll hold you over.
Right.
And so I recommend for anyone who's trying to transition, because you've been on the Popeyes and the Burger King and all the things, is if you see a new spot, take some time, go in there and look and see what's there. Like, it may not be something you normally go eat, but go in there and look at the menu and think about your route. The route that you take, whether it's your route to work, your route to church, your route to school, like whatever daily routes you take, look at what's along that route. And because there are going to be times where you're not going to make a time at home, where you forgot to pack.
Right.
So look and see where you can be well fed. When I first started transitioning, I used to go to Whole Foods a lot and eat off their hot bar, or like their deli, because they had, at the time, this is like 2009, 2008, 2007, they had more veggie options than I was used to seeing at places. So that would give me an opportunity to try new things. Like, okay, well, I could get like a little small container and put in some Brussels sprouts, or, you know, try this like vegan lasagna. Like, what is this? You know, and it just allowed me to kind of open up my taste buds and try new things, while at the same time I'm getting fed. I'm like, you know, I can hold me over so I get home to my food there, and I don't feel like I'm cheating, or like I'm abandoning my agreement with myself to say I'm going to be eating healthy. Yeah.
I know we've been at it for a minute. I have one question, and then maybe we could start to wind it down, and maybe part two.
You go ahead and ask that. I'm gonna look at, because we've had quite a few comments actually on Facebook, and I just want to get to some of those questions. So
but you know, we're out here living in a time of Rona. And I think living during a pandemic probably requires some specific things from our diet that might be more applicable now than they are ordinarily.
Yeah.
What would you suggest, like, you know, that people really pay attention to, because we are living in a pandemic, as far as putting in our bodies and just like thinking about and all that?
Yeah. So the first thing I want to address is, I remember at the height of it, there are these reports, Black people are dying, Black people are the most affected. And I used to be so bothered, because the way they presented it was like, just by virtue of being Black, you were just going to die. And I was like, no. That's not the whole story.
Right.
That's not the whole story. Why? Why is it that Black people who happen to get this virus are then like more susceptible to death? And so looking at those diseases again, right? So if you already had an existing condition, it possibly meant that you may not survive having the Rona. So thinking about that, right? This goes back into like the foods that we're eating, creating diseases that we don't have to have. So in a sense, like, this is avoidable. You can change your diet to reflect the health that you want to have. And so I know people want quick fixes. Like, tell me what to take so I can build up my immune system.
Right.
Immunity is built up over time. You have been either building your immunity or destroying your immunity since you came out the womb. And the beautiful thing is that even though it has to be built up over time, it doesn't take forever, right? So it's not like you're doomed. But I would start with doing daily things like putting more, like when you're cooking with garlic, cooking with ginger, cooking with turmeric. Turmeric is also in curry powder, so if you've been eating curry, you're doing all right. But putting more of that into your foods, into your diet. And if you want to take it like as medicine, you could cut up some garlic, like a bowl of garlic, mix it with a little honey so it's more palatable, and then like crush that really, really fine so it's almost like a paste, and then swallow that down with some water. And that can help give your system a boost. But I would really also recommend like eating a variety of foods. And so I wouldn't so much focus on trying to take a vitamin, a multivitamin, etc. Because for everyone's body, their body may not be able to process that man-made form of it, but instead just making sure that you get fresh produce and that you get a variety of foods and that you're eating more whole foods, more plant-based foods, and also more fresh foods. So oftentimes, like when you do cook foods, the live enzymes in them will also die. Doesn't mean that the food doesn't have any nutritional value, but it doesn't have those enzymes. And those enzymes are also helpful in making sure that you're nourished and that you thrive. And so if you're having food, always have some type of fresh vegetables. So if you are having like, say you're used to having like rice and chicken. So instead you might substitute for the chicken for like a vegan version, mushrooms or some vegan chicken or whatever, and then add a salad in there, right? So even if you have some cooked greens, add some fresh greens as well to give your body that. But I would focus on making sure that you're starting to change your diet and you're not just changing it in reaction to this, but that it's a lifestyle change. Because if the next wave of something hits, who knows, right? If something else hits, you can't just start taking vitamins and think that's gonna make it better.
That's gonna make it better.
And just keep doing it. And
right.
Just I mean, another way to get it in is like start making sure you have some green juice every day. The green juice could be like start off fruity, but I recommend that you make it more vegetable based. If you remember one thing is that vegetables build the body, fruits clean the body. They are both very good for you, but they also have different purposes. So it's good to focus on those body builders, those vegetables. They also reset the palate. They also support your organs, like your liver. Your liver has to do a lot of the filtering out of your body. If your liver is taxed because you've been eating all the things, and you know the things I'm talking about, you've been eating all the things, then that like all of it, the Aunt Jemima, the Ben and Jerry's, all of it, what's Little Debbie, all of them. So if you've been eating all those things, your liver is taxed, and you've been drinking a lot of alcohol on top of that. So you want to begin to give your liver support. Eating those vegetables helps support the liver so that it can do its job and filter out what needs to be filtered out so that your body is thriving and more nourished. Yeah.
Yo, listen. I mean, we could talk about this all day because I got all kind of questions. I want to go into so many things. I want to go into exercise. I want to go into, and this is actually what we're getting ready to talk about now, but just so many different things like, blending what you're talking about with exercise. I want to go back to the therapy part and understand how this connects to the spirit. Like we probably got to do a part 2 or something because it's just so many places we could take this, but I know we wanna wrap up. We don't want to take up too much of your day. But we do have a couple comments. One person said Miss Lady in the Blue got a cute smile. So you have an admirer on here. Street Academy Podcast hooking people up. You know what I mean? We look, you get food and you get a date. And,
I'm already hooked up with the person who made that comment. He thought he was cute.
Say you got a cute smile though. But Shizzle, so of course our co-host Amber, she's been on, and one of the things she said was when you talked about looking at ourselves as many cells and hosts rather than a singular entity, I think that was something that definitely resonated with her. One of our homegirls, Antoinette, she's like, I'm speechless. Like this whole thing is just so dope, especially when you were talking about your story about your grandparents. And she said, that's my story. I'm just seeing that connection with having parents and grandparents, especially if they're like of different ethnicities or different backgrounds. And so being able to put your food story together. I remember I was watching a podcast talking about your money story. It was a podcast about relationships, but they were talking about like, you know, your relationship to money and knowing your past relationship with money so you can know how to, you know, so you can know how to adjust that. And I think you're bringing that up with food, like knowing your past relationship with food and your families and your parents and grandparents' relationship with food and how, you know, how do we change that for our children, you know what I'm saying, our nieces, our nephews, whoever, you know. My boy Jasper said, changing your plate for the culture, fascinating. Amber said, Jackie's greens are the bomb. So folks out here wanting the recipe, Dr. Hader, they want the recipe for them greens we had that one time.
Real easy. I'll drop it in the chat.
we gonna put it out there. We gonna give y'all the recipe. Y'all go to the YouTube channel where we put this up on YouTube. But really what everybody wants now, we could probably end this here, this, and then also talk a little bit about, you know, what you're doing and where people can find you, what they can expect from you in the future. If, you know, if folks want to hire you as a personal chef, like all of that kind of stuff, we can even end it there. But really what people want to know is them recipes. Folks want to know, how do I, you know what I'm saying? Like just some tangible stuff they could take away right now on how they could eat well, how they could be a mindful eater, how they could look like you going into 40. You know what I'm saying? Like folks want to know that. So.
Yeah, so my personal chef days are over. So like, I'm sorry to bust your bubble. Out of retirement for like, I'll come out of retirement for Jack. Like, Jack, you want me to cater that thing? I got you. But however, I have like left all of those recipes on my blog, which is bodyfoodfreedom.com. And on that blog, you will find recipes galore, plant-based recipes mainly, but I also have recipes for my transitioners. My folks who are like, yeah, I still want some chicken now.
Yeah. I'm the first transition right here.
I got you. And I'm just encouraging you, like if you are transitioning, instead of buying the Tyson, the regular stuff you've been buying, I encourage you to go to the health food store because they also sell meat there in some health food stores. And you know that their meat has been vetted through a different process. It's typically coming from a smaller family farm, one that's more local, and one where they know their practices. Like those chickens might be able to go out and get some sun for the day. They might not just be eating a hormonal feed. They're probably not eating, they aren't eating any hormones at all. And so there's a variety in their diet, et cetera. They actually have a bit more of a chickeny lifestyle than just being up all day, literally. So I recommend, like, if you are going to continue to eat meat, begin to look at where you get your meat, how it's processed, because that makes a huge difference. And then also, the blog is static, so it's like pictures and recipes, etc. But I also have a YouTube channel called The Mindful Plate. And so on that channel, I show you how to make recipes. I take you through different lessons around mindful eating. So if you want to become a mindful eater, if you find that you've been an emotional eater or a standard American diet eater and you're wanting to shift into more plant-based and then using mindfulness as an approach, then on that channel, you'll find lots of recipes as well. I release a video every week. And I also share that on the newsletter. So I can send a newsletter to you as well. And the last video I just did this week was jerk jackfruit kebabs. Delicious. If you ever had jackfruit does an amazing job of imitating chicken. It's unreal. And so we did some jerk jackfruit this week on the YouTube channel. But that's where you can find me. And then if you do want to bring me in, like I said, I'm not personal chefing, but I do teach workshops. And all my workshops are always catered because I feel like it's not enough to teach about the food and talk about the food. You got to taste it, right? Mm-hmm. So I want to like not only change your mind, but I want to change your taste buds too. I want you to be able to taste like yeah, I'm not just talking this, like your bodies are about this. And so I also teach workshops as well. So again, you can reach me at bodyfoodfreedom.com. That's my blog. Everything lives there. And if you are on YouTube, The Mindful Plate, and you can find me there as well.
Dopeness. Ooh, how you? I feel good, yo. I feel healthy just after this conversation.
Listen, I'm ready. What's crazy is that I bought some kebab sticks for a barbecue like maybe a summer ago, 2 summers ago. And it just so happened that I was opening the pantry and I saw them like on the side. And I was like, man, I still have these kebab sticks. I should do something with them. So now you talking about kebabs and the jackfruit kebabs. I might need to go ahead and try it.
It's so easy too. It don't take a lot of time, y'all. Oh, I wish I had a photo. I just want to show you. It looks so good. But it's on the YouTube. So
it's on the YouTube.
On Instagram too. I'm more active on Instagram than I am on Facebook. I'm there at Shelley Wellness, SHE.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, Shelley Wellness on Instagram. So on Instagram, I'm always promoting the next YouTube video that I have and sharing tidbits about eating well as well. So there's a lot of food pictures on there. So if you kind of want to get inspired for what to make that night, just go to my Instagram and scroll. You will find a dish that you like, and the recipe will be there, or link you back to the blog where you can get the full recipe.
We're gonna drop the link in the chat for all that too.
Yeah. We're gonna drop that in there. Man, yo, I'm feeling good. Hey, y'all, make sure y'all check out at Shelley Wellness. How do you spell that?
SHELEY Wellness, all one word.
Dope. So y'all go there, Instagram. Y'all got what was the blog again?
The blog is bodyfoodfreedom.com.
Bodyfoodfreedom.com, and the YouTube is.
YouTube is the Mindful Plate. I know that's all the names. I started them all at different times. I was like, well, we just gonna live with it.
It's all good. We just gonna go with it.
Listen, right.
Look, the Mindful Plate on YouTube. So y'all definitely check out Shelley Wellness. Thank you so much for being here. This was so enlightening. Dr. Hader, thank you so much for making this connection. You know what I'm saying? And using hours of hate for good this time.
Listen, I'm hating on a colonized diet.
We try to liberate our mind.
Liberate your plate. Hello.
Yes.
Liberate your plate. Ooh, that's a nice one. All right, I'm gonna need 5% of that. But yeah, liberate your plate.
Take 5% from my.
Just 5%. I charge the white man 10, so if you see.
Oh my God. Now, liberate your plate is mine. Decolonize your diet was already taken. So I have to.
That's yours right there. Cool. Well, yo, thank y'all so much for joining in. It's been Street Academy Podcast, where we keep one foot in the academy, one foot in the streets. Y'all go ahead and follow us all. Follow Shelley at Shelley Wellness. You can follow me, Jonathan Grant, at J. Paul Grant. You can follow Jackie Forbes, a.k.a. Dr. Hader, at Jackie Domitian. Amber Camilla, you can follow her at Amber Camilla. And like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Street Academy is popping. We all over. We on all the podcasts now. So pretty much anywhere where you see podcasts, just type in Street Academy Podcast. Ain't nobody got that, because ain't nobody doing what we doing on the internet. Because we, you know what I'm saying? We unique. We originals. That's what it is. So super excited. Any last minute thoughts, Jackie?
My heart and mind is clear.
Hey, there it is then, y'all. We out.
All right. Bye, y'all.
Peace.
Got their feet upon the neck of the haters, the game and the devil like came in.